So speaking of DNA and forensics, our next speaker is Lindsay Bauman. Lindsay is a former DNA analyst. She helped solve crimes. However, being a Southern Californian, the ocean always drew her in, and so she did what most aspiring marine conservationists do. She moved clear across the world to rainy, cold Amsterdam. There, she volunteered on a project to study the genetics of sea sponges and cucumbers, and soon after found herself applying to the Scripps MAS MBC program, wanting to switch careers to work between the intersection of science and policy. Her biggest accomplishment while being here at the program was really cultivating the relationships, not just at Scripps, but with fishermen and scientists across the state. This quarter for her capstone, Lindsay worked with these stakeholders to help inform the new California Experimental Fishing Permit Program. The title of her project today is Sustaining California's Catch, Fishing into the Future with the New Experimental Fishing Permit Program.
Thank you, Samantha, for that introduction, and thank you to all for listening at home. So when I first came to Scripps, I was so excited for all the ocean activities I was going to get to be doing, like snorkeling and scuba diving, and to my surprise, I became really interested in the world of policy. And one of the things that interests me the most about policy are all the different moving parts, like the regulations, the guidelines, and also the public's involvement. In fact, one of my course assignments was to make a public comment. And so I went to one of the California Fish and Game Commission meetings, and there I felt really inspired by seeing all the fishermen and community members that were there to give their input. And so I knew for my capstone project, I wanted to incorporate a relevant policy issue here in California and also do something that could not only benefit the fishing industry, but also fisheries managers. And living in California for the past year, I've gotten to know some of the fishermen here, and we've gotten to talk about some of the problems facing the industry here in California. You know, they're faced with everything such as climate change, where ocean conditions are changing and species are moving, and so that's led them to not want to rely on a single species anymore to catch. They want to diversify their catch and fish lightly over a variety of species. Younger fishermen are also trying to get into the industry right now, and it's a little bit difficult with prohibitory costs and complex regulations, and so looking for ways to get those young people into the industry as the current fleet is aging. California also has a lot of small-scale fishermen, and so making sure that there are options for them to continue to fish into the future as well. And probably one of the biggest things, especially right now, is uncertainty. The COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating impacts on California's fisheries. They've had decreased international markets as well as local markets because of restaurants closing. And so it's really important to make sure that we can protect this resource and not only make sure we have options for fishermen, but continue to fish into the future. So all of these things compounded with California fisheries needs. In order to maintain and protect this resource, we do need a lot more fisheries data to inform better management. We also need more fishery management plans to make sure that we are adequately managing all these different species. And we also need to really find out, what does adaptation look like for California's fisheries amidst climate change? One way of going about doing this in the past was through experimental gear permits. And these permits allowed for on-the-water experimentation outside of normal fishing regulations. So they allowed for things like fishing with novel fishing gear, using modified fishing gear, looking at new species and new fisheries. And it was only for the commercial fishermen, and although this program was well-intended, it wasn't utilized as much as it should have because it wasn't under a formalized program with clear guidelines and objectives. So unfortunately, the potential benefits that it could have had to the fishing industry and fisheries managers alike wasn't there. So in 2018, the experimental gear permits were overhauled and a new bill was passed to establish standards for the California Experimental Fishing Permit Program. And what this program would entail would be a more formalized process for not only applying to the permit system, but also managing the permits and seeing what kind of information could be gathered for fisheries management. And this would provide opportunities to fishermen all throughout California for exactly the same things that the experimental gear permits would, like experimental fishing with new gear and new fisheries. And it also included recreational fishermen. And so the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is currently tasked with developing this program, and it is expected to begin in 2021. Here's where my Capstone project comes in. Since the California Department of Fish and Wildlife are currently developing this program, I'm going to be providing background research for this program in the form of looking at some of the potential ideas that currently exist out there for experimental fishing, looking at some of the potential benefits and limitations of the program, and also providing recommendations for the program from all of these different things. And I will also be creating one-page summary sheets. So I'll be going over a few of these things with you today. So at this point in time, you might be wondering, well, Lindsay, what the heck is experimental fishing anyways? And I know when I think of an experiment, I think of this. I think of somebody in a lab coat, because that's what I used to do. In fact, this is one of my old coworkers. However, experimental fishing looks a little more like this. You're on the water, you're experimenting with new gear or modified fishing gear. You're also looking at new fisheries, so you could be targeting a new fish or other marine species. And one way the federal government has gone about doing this is through federal exempted fishing permits, which the California Experimental Fishing Permit Program will be modeled after. So like many of us right now, I was home, I was trying to work, I was making a lot of calls, making a lot of Zoom calls, and I got to talk to some really incredible people. In fact, I got to talk to a bunch of different experts throughout California. I got to speak to 28 commercial and recreational fishermen, and 31 scientists from universities, NGOs, nonprofits, and state and federal agencies. And the 5 regions above are where these people were located at in California. So for the first part of my project, I was to look at some of the potential experimental fishing permit projects that currently exist in California. And from those projects, I categorized them into 3 different classifications, with the first one being gear. Are they using a new fishing gear, or is it a modified fishing gear that's currently in use? Or is it a new fishery where they're targeting a new species of fish or other marine species, or is it both? So this graph kind of shows where these ideas currently lie right now. And today I'm going to be talking about 2 of these examples a little bit more in depth. So in Monterey and the Bay Area, there's a large fleet of Dungeness crab fishermen. And their gear kind of looks like this. There's a trap on the seafloor with a vertical line going up to 2 buoys on the surface, so fishermen can easily spot where their traps are for retrieval. However, with climate change, whales have been migrating and foraging for food closer and closer to the shore. And so in some instances, this has actually caused whale entanglements. And this is a huge issue for the fishing industry because they want to reduce this risk and they want to keep fishing into the future. And resource managers want them to continue fishing into the future for this valuable resource. So one way of mitigating this and reducing this risk of whale entanglement is through new gear. And you might be thinking, well, what does new gear look like? Well, new gear would eliminate having a vertical line in the water, and it would be ropeless, or more correctly termed pop-up gear. And this gear would look a little bit like this. There would be a trap with a spool of rope or an inflatable bag on it that would be remotely activated by the fishermen and rise to the surface when they wanted to retrieve it. And the cool thing, too, about a lot of this gear is they have GPS location devices on them, so you could not only mitigate a lot of the risk for whale entanglements, but you could also collect data on, spatial data on the fishery, which could improve fisheries management. Another type of a potential project idea for this experimental fishing permit program is a new fishery. And so the 2 examples on this slide would be to target octopus species in both shallow and deeper waters. And so for a shallow fishery, would be targeting the middle picture of the 2-spot octopus, and it would be using a more eco-friendly gear, the clay pots, And this would take advantage of an octopus's ability to seek refuge. And this method has also been used in ancient Japan and would provide fishermen with a way to diversify their catch. The next fishery would be to target a deeper dwelling octopus species, the giant Pacific octopus, utilizing current traps that spot prawn and box crab fishermen are currently using. And this would also help fishermen diversify their catch. And currently in California, the species is not fished, so there's not a whole lot of data around this species. So this experimental fishing permit idea could provide information on the predation, the abundance, and also other behaviors of this species. From these potential project ideas and also suggestions from all of these really incredible experts, I was able to formulate some recommendations for the experimental fishing permit program. And some of the recommendations are up on your screen, and they range from looking at potential funding mechanisms, because these projects are going to be labor intensive, looking to have more affordable permit costs for these experimental fishing permits, and just really having transparency and clear guidelines throughout the application process, as well as the management of these permits going forward. So where does this all leave us? The experimental fishing permit program is going to be implemented in 2021. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is currently developing that program, and what's been really cool is that I've actually been able to give the department real-time feedback from a lot of these different experts, and this feedback has actually already been incorporated into some of the development of the program. And so finally, and most importantly, this program stands to have numerous benefits not only for the fishing industry, but fisheries managers as California moves into the future with its fisheries. At this point in time, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank all the people that made this possible. I am wholly indebted to the fishermen and the scientists that I had the opportunity of speaking with for my project. My Capstone committee, Marina, Carrie, Tanner, Bryce, and Erica, thank you for all your guidance and support. Kirk, thank you for helping me formulate the idea. Thank you to Samantha and Risa for all your coaching and mentoring. Thank you to my inspirational cohort, and thank you to my husband Garrison and our dog Coco for getting me outside during this project for fresh air. Thank you. Okay, now I'll be available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Lindsay. Do you have a sense of how many fishermen are expected to apply for the new experimental fishing permit program?
That's an excellent question, Samantha. I think right now a lot of fishermen are interested in the program and the potential benefits of the program. However, since the program is going to be implemented next year, I think it really depends on where the fishermen are at right now. I mean, we're facing the pandemic, and with other uncertainties in the world, I think it'll really depend on what's going on with their business, but a lot of them are really excited about the program, so I do anticipate quite a few applying.
And what was the most difficult part about, executing this project in the face of quarantine and a global public health crisis?
Some of the challenges, I think, were not being able to meet some of the fishermen in person and, building that relationship. But some of them, over the phone, it was great talking to them and hearing about their life story and the history of fishing. But I would have to say, overall, the biggest challenge was talking to so many people and trying to make sure all of that feedback was incorporated in my report, because everybody had such great ideas and suggestions for the program, and so I wanted to do justice by all of those.
Great. And how can folks find out more about the program, and when do we expect it to roll out?
We expect it to roll out in 2021 right now. Like I said, they're still in the development phase right now and pending, what goes on with everything in the world. But you can find out more about the program probably later this year. They do anticipate to have a designated website for this program, and actually this summer I might be working on helping make some one-page summaries for this website with some supplementary information. And you can also email me as well. Thank you so much.